I'm Dr. Michael Harrison, and today I want to share something that could make a real difference in your life. What I'm about to tell you might be the most important conversation we ever have, because every single year, nearly 800,000 Americans experience a stroke. That's one person every 40 seconds. And here's what keeps me up at night after 4 decades of practicing medicine. Most of them never saw it coming. They woke up that morning feeling fine. They went through their usual routine: coffee, maybe some news, a few emails, and then somewhere between breakfast and lunch, their whole world changed forever. But what if I told you the warning signs were there all along? What if certain everyday morning habits, things you've done for years without a second thought, were quietly tripling your stroke risk? Not doubling, tripling. That's what the research shows, and it's what I witnessed throughout my career. In my decades of practicing medicine, I watched this pattern unfold more times than I care to count. Good people, smart people, people who thought they were doing everything right, but they were missing the subtle signals their bodies were sending every morning. Before we dive in, I want to be clear. While I'm a physician sharing evidence-based information, this video is for educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for personalized medical advice from your own doctor. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health regimen. Today I'm going to walk you through the 5 morning habits I've seen silently raise stroke risk in my patients over 60. Some might even describe your morning routine right now. And by the end you'll understand exactly why certain everyday behaviors create the perfect storm for a stroke and what simple changes can dramatically lower your risk. I'm also going to share fascinating research from Japanese longevity medicine. Japan has some of the oldest, healthiest populations in the world, and their physicians have been studying stroke prevention for generations. Their centenarians follow morning practices that directly contradict what most Americans do. What they've learned should be required knowledge for every senior in this country. Here's what I tell my patients. Strokes don't come out of nowhere. The signs are there if you know what to look for. The causes are there if you understand your body. And with the right awareness, strokes can be prevented far more often than most people realize. But the clock starts early, often first thing in the morning, during those critical first hours when your body is most vulnerable. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. I'll call him Robert. He was 74 years old, a retired accountant, sharp as a tack. He came to see me not because he felt sick, but because something felt off. Robert told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Doc, I've been dropping my keys more than usual lately. My wife noticed I've been fumbling with buttons on my shirts. I thought maybe it was just arthritis setting in. You know how it is at my age." But I knew better than to dismiss subtle neurological changes, so I asked more questions. Robert mentioned he'd had a strange moment a few days earlier where he tried to write a simple grocery list and forgot how to spell the word milk. Just completely blanked on a word he'd written thousands of times throughout his life. No headache, no slurring, no dramatic symptoms, just this moment of unexpected confusion that passed quickly and left him feeling unsettled. We ran a scan, and what we discovered changed everything. Robert had experienced what we call a transient ischemic attack, essentially a mini-stroke, earlier that week. His brain had been warning him through those subtle symptoms, and thank goodness he was paying attention. The next 48 hours were absolutely critical. We adjusted his medication immediately, cleaned up his diet, monitored his blood pressure and hydration levels around the clock. Robert never had a full stroke because we caught the warning in time. A landmark study published in the Lancet Neurology confirmed what I saw in Robert's case. Researchers followed thousands of patients after these mini-strokes and found that the first 48 hours represented the highest risk window for a major event. But here's the hopeful part. If a patient received proper treatment during that critical window, the risk of a major stroke dropped by more than 80%. That's how dramatically you can change the outcome when you know what to look for. Now you might be wondering why mornings are so particularly dangerous. Why not the middle of a stressful workday? Why not during vigorous exercise or a heated argument? The answer lies in what's happening inside your body while you sleep. Your brain wakes up before you do. It's already beginning to shift gears, increasing certain hormones, preparing your entire body for the day ahead. And for most people over 60, that first hour after opening your eyes is when your body is at its most vulnerable state. Here's the science behind it, broken down the way I explain it to my patients. Overnight, your body becomes significantly dehydrated. You haven't had a single drop of water in 6 to 8 hours, sometimes even longer. Your blood thickens as a result of this dehydration. At the same time, your cortisol levels spike sharply at dawn. This is completely normal. It's called the cortisol awakening response, and it's actually what helps you wake up. But for many seniors, blood pressure follows that cortisol spike, rising rapidly in the early morning hours. So picture what's happening inside your cardiovascular system. You have thick, dehydrated blood moving through your vessels. Those vessels are tighter because of the cortisol surge coursing through your system. And there's a rapid increase in pressure pushing through arteries that have been aging for 60, 70, sometimes 80 years. That creates what I call the perfect storm for a vascular event. Add to that the way most people actually start their day, fast, distracted, stressed, with habits that compound every single one of these problems, and you've created an environment where stroke risk quietly triples. The Japanese physicians who study longevity understand this intimately. Their longest-lived patients approach mornings completely differently, with careful rituals designed to ease the body gently into wakefulness. Let me walk you through these dangerous habits one by one, and I want you to notice something important. These aren't exotic behaviors. They're incredibly common. They're deeply cultural. Some of them probably feel like second nature to you because you've done them your entire adult life. But after 60, convenience can be costly, and awareness is always the first step toward protection. The first habit is the most overlooked of all, and it's simply this: skipping water in the morning. Most seniors wake up and head straight for their coffee. Maybe they brush their teeth first, check their phone, scroll through a few messages, pour that first cup, and officially start the day. But they don't drink any plain water first, not a single glass. And I understand how this might feel to hear, because that coffee ritual is probably one of the great pleasures of your morning. I get it, I love my morning coffee too. But that habit, when practiced without proper hydration first, is putting unnecessary strain on your entire cardiovascular system. After 8 hours of sleep without any fluid intake, your blood is like a sponge that hasn't been soaked. It's thicker, more viscous, slower moving through your vessels. Medical researchers measure this using something called blood viscosity, and it increases measurably during overnight sleep. Thick blood moves slower through your vessels, it clots more easily, and it stresses both your heart and your brain as they work harder to maintain proper circulation. Research published in the European Journal of Neurology found something that stopped me in my tracks when I first encountered it. Low morning hydration was a contributing factor in 48% of first-time ischemic strokes among seniors. Let that sink in for a moment. Nearly half of first strokes weren't primarily caused by genetics. They weren't primarily caused by family history. They weren't even primarily caused by poor diet. The biggest single contributing factor was simply dehydration at the wrong time of day. So here's what I tell every single one of my patients over 60. Before anything else in the morning, drink water. Room temperature or slightly warm is best, not ice cold. One full glass, about 8 ounces, before the coffee, before the pills, before checking the news or your email. You're not just quenching thirst, you're actively rehydrating your brain. You're thinning your blood to proper consistency. You're supporting every vessel in your body as it transitions from rest to activity. Japanese centenarians have understood this wisdom for generations. Many of them drink warm water with a small amount of lemon as their very first act upon waking each day. They've been doing this for centuries. The second morning habit that raises stroke risk after 60 is something almost nobody talks about. It's staying sedentary too long in bed before actually moving your body. I'm talking about waking up and then lying there for extended periods, maybe sitting up against the pillows, scrolling through your phone, watching morning television, or just staying still for 20 or 30 minutes without any real physical movement. After 60, your blood vessels are less elastic than they used to be. They don't respond as quickly to changes in position. If you go from hours of lying completely flat to just sitting motionless, blood pools in your lower body. That reduces return flow to your heart significantly. It decreases what we call brain perfusion, which is simply the flow of blood reaching your brain tissue. And for someone with existing plaque buildup or any clot risk, those first movements after prolonged stillness can actually be the trigger for a serious event. I've seen strokes happen in the bathroom because patients went directly from lying down for 8 hours to straining without any transition period at all. It sounds dramatic, but it's more common than most people realize, and it's entirely preventable. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Helen. She was 69, recently retired from teaching elementary school, and she loved her slow mornings. Her routine was to wake up around 7, prop herself up on pillows, and spend about 45 minutes reading on her tablet before getting out of bed. One morning, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, stood up, and immediately felt lightheaded. She grabbed the nightstand, steadied herself, and then walked toward the bathroom. She made it 3 steps before collapsing to the floor. Helen's husband found her there, confused and unable to speak clearly. She'd had a stroke. When we analyzed what happened, we discovered that her prolonged morning stillness had allowed blood to pool in her lower extremities. When she suddenly stood and walked, A small clot that had formed dislodged and traveled directly to her brain. Helen survived, thankfully. But her recovery took 18 long months of rehabilitation. And the truly heartbreaking part? It could have been prevented with just 5 minutes of gentle movement before she got out of bed that morning. Here's the safer alternative I recommend to all my patients. Wake up slowly, but move early. Do ankle rolls while you're still lying down. Point your toes toward the foot of the bed, then pull them back toward your shins. Repeat this simple motion 10 times. Flex and extend your knees gently. Then when you sit up, do some shoulder circles, rolling them forward and backward several times. Add a few gentle neck rolls. Stand up gently, holding on to something stable for that first moment. This simple sequence gets blood moving upward again, safely and gradually. Even 2 minutes of this kind of gentle movement can prime your entire cardiovascular system for a much safer morning. That's not a significant time investment for such significant protection. Habit number 3 is skipping breakfast. Entirely, and this one affects nearly everyone I know, particularly retirees. Too many older adults wake up, drink their coffee, take their morning medications on a completely empty stomach, and eat nothing substantial until lunch or even later. They tell me they're not hungry in the morning, or they've read about intermittent fasting, and they're trying to extend their overnight fast because they heard it was healthy. But after 60, that approach can be genuinely risky, especially for the brain. Here's why this matters so much. Fasting does have documented benefits in younger bodies, with stable blood sugar regulation and strong hormonal rhythms. But after 60, the body becomes significantly more vulnerable to what we call hypoglycemia, which is simply low blood sugar. And when your blood sugar drops too low, your brain suffers first and most severely. Your brain runs almost exclusively on glucose for energy. Unlike your muscles, which can burn fat for fuel, your brain requires a constant supply of blood sugar to function properly, and it doesn't store much glucose locally. So if you're already dehydrated from overnight sleep, and then you don't eat anything, you're creating perfect conditions for dizziness, mental fog, confusion, or worse, a vascular event. This risk is dramatically amplified if you're taking blood pressure medication or diabetes medication on an empty stomach. I want to pause here and remind you that I'm not suggesting you change any medications or treatments without speaking to your prescribing physician first. What I'm sharing today may inform a valuable conversation with your doctor, but any changes should only be made under their guidance. Let me tell you about another patient of mine. I'll call her Eleanor. She was 68 years old, a retired school teacher, very health conscious. She walked 3 miles every single day, never smoked, rarely drank alcohol. She'd been practicing intermittent fasting for about 2 years because her daughter told her it would help with longevity. Eleanor would wake up at 6 in the morning, take her blood pressure medication with black coffee, and not consume any calories until noon. One morning, Eleanor stood up from her kitchen table and the entire room started spinning around her. She grabbed the counter, waited for it to pass, and wrote it off as standing up too fast. But it happened again the next morning, and the morning after that, and each episode lasted a little longer. When she finally came to see me, her blood work revealed something concerning. Her morning glucose levels were dropping to dangerously low levels, well below the normal range that her brain needed to function safely. We made one simple change to her routine: a small breakfast within 30 minutes of waking, containing some protein and a little healthy fat. Within 2 weeks, the dizzy spells stopped completely. Within a month, she felt more energetic than she'd felt in years. Instead of skipping breakfast, I recommend a small protein-rich meal within the first hour of waking. It doesn't need to be elaborate. Half a boiled egg, a tablespoon of Greek yogurt, a small handful of soaked walnuts or almonds, just enough nutrition to stabilize your blood sugar and send a signal to your brain that you're being supported. Habit number 4 is rushing into psychological stress first thing in the morning. And this is something I didn't fully understand until later in my medical career. Let me explain what I mean. It's checking the news headlines before your feet even hit the floor. It's reading emails at the breakfast table before you've finished your water. It's engaging in difficult conversations or arguments with your spouse about finances or family problems before you've moved your body, before you've eaten anything, before you've given your brain time to wake up properly. Why is this such a significant problem? Because your brain after sleep is in what I would describe as a fragile transitional state. It hasn't fully shifted into active cognitive gear yet. Your prefrontal cortex, which handles stress management and emotional regulation, is still warming up. Meanwhile, Your cortisol is already naturally peaking as part of your normal wake-up process. Your blood pressure is naturally rising. If you add mental strain to that particular vulnerable moment, you amplify the entire physiological stress response dramatically. Here's what the research shows. A major study published in the journal Stroke followed over 93,000 people for more than a decade. The researchers found that individuals who experienced high psychological stress early in the day were significantly more likely to suffer a stroke over the following years, even when the analysis controlled for other risk factors like age, smoking history, and blood pressure. And here's the finding that really concerned me. The elevated risk was highest in those over 60 years old, and highest of all within the first 3 hours of waking each morning. Instead of diving into stress immediately upon waking, I encourage all my patients to create what I call a buffer zone. 10 quiet minutes at minimum, gentle stretching in your bedroom, a short walk even just to the end of your driveway and back, or simply sitting with your tea or coffee and being present, being still, before the demands of the day begin pressing in on you. This is not luxury, this is not self-indulgence, this is neurological hygiene. You're giving your brain a genuine chance to stabilize before you load it with tasks and worries. Japanese centenarians are famous for their morning rituals of calm, sometimes including meditation, gentle movement, or simply sitting quietly with tea. There's profound wisdom in that approach. Now here's the part most people miss entirely, and it's why I saved this for last. We've covered 4 habits so far: skipping water, staying still in bed too long, skipping breakfast, and rushing into psychological stress. But I saved the most important habit for the end because it truly underlies everything else we've discussed. The 5th morning habit that quietly increases stroke risk, the one that consistently flies under the radar, is prolonged physical inactivity in that first hour or two after waking. I'm talking about waking up and then spending the next hour or two essentially motionless, sitting on the edge of the bed, sitting at the kitchen table, sitting on the couch watching morning television. No real movement, no meaningful circulation, just stillness. I think we're all guilty of this at various times, especially after retirement. You wake up when your body wakes you. You pour a cup of coffee, maybe you read the newspaper, or watch the morning news for an hour. It feels civilized, it feels restful, it even feels healthy in a way, like you're finally enjoying the relaxed mornings you earned. But here's what's happening inside your body during all that pleasant stillness. After 60, your blood is already more prone to clotting than when you were younger. Your veins don't push blood upward as efficiently. Without regular movement to activate your calf muscles and encourage what we call venous return, your entire vascular system slows down significantly. Your legs become what I call pooling zones, where blood collects, and that's precisely where most dangerous clots begin. The evidence is absolutely clear on this point. A major study published in the journal Circulation tracked over 8,000 adults over the age of 60 for several years. Those who spent more than 9 hours per day sedentary had double the stroke risk. But here's what surprised even me after 40 years of medicine. That elevated risk remained even if they exercised vigorously later in the day. People who sat for 9 hours but then went to the gym still had elevated stroke risk. Why? Because it's not just about how much total movement you accumulate. It's critically important when that movement occurs. The timing matters as much as the quantity. The first hour after waking represents a critical window. If you move early, you activate your circulation. You signal to every system in your body that the day has truly begun. Blood starts flowing properly to your extremities and returning efficiently to your heart and brain. But if you remain still during that window, your body assumes it's still in rest mode. That stagnation becomes one of the strongest predictors of stroke later in life. So what's the solution? Nothing extreme is required. You don't need a treadmill. You don't need to break a sweat. Just 5 to 10 minutes of light mobility within that first hour makes an enormous difference. March in place while your coffee brews in the kitchen. Do some gentle shoulder rolls while sitting on the edge of your bed. Stretch your arms overhead and hold for a few slow breaths. Step outside to check the weather. Walk to your mailbox and back at whatever pace feels comfortable. The specific activity matters far less than the simple fact of movement. You're telling your blood it's time to flow properly. This reminds me of one of the most meaningful conversations I ever had with a patient. His name was George. He was 71 when I first met him, a retired factory supervisor who'd spent his career on his feet, moving around a production floor. His wife had passed away about 2 years before, and George had been living alone, gradually falling into habits that worried his adult children. Without his wife or his job, George had developed a deeply sedentary routine. He would wake up around 7 each morning, shuffle to his recliner with a cup of instant coffee and the television remote, and essentially stay there motionless until lunchtime. Some days he wouldn't truly move around for 4 or 5 hours after waking. His daughter finally convinced him to come see me after she noticed during their weekly phone calls that he seemed more confused than usual. When George sat across from me in my office, he looked defeated. He said something that has stayed with me for years. He told me, "Doc, I feel like I'm disappearing. Like every morning I wake up a little bit less than I was the day before. Like pieces of me are just fading away." His blood pressure was notably elevated. His cholesterol numbers were in concerning ranges. But what struck me most was his morning routine. Every single protective habit we've discussed today was absent from George's mornings. We created a simple morning protocol together. Water on his nightstand, so hydration became his very first act upon waking. 5 minutes of gentle movement, simple stretches and marching in place, before he allowed himself to sit in that recliner. A small protein-rich breakfast within the first hour, even just some peanut butter on a single piece of toast. And 30 minutes each morning, with no television news, no phone calls about problems. 6 weeks later, George came in for a follow-up, and his daughter was sitting right beside him. The first thing he said to me was, "Doc, I feel clearer in my thinking than I have in years. I actually feel like myself again." His daughter called me privately the following week to thank me for giving her father back. "Let me bring everything together for you now, with clear, actionable steps you can implement starting tomorrow morning. Step 1 is water before coffee. Keep a glass of room temperature water on your nightstand tonight. Tomorrow morning, the moment you wake up, drink it, all of it." This single habit addresses dehydration and initiates improved blood circulation from the very first moment of your day. Step 2 is movement within the first 10 minutes after waking. Ankle rolls while still lying down, shoulder circles while sitting on the bed, a slow, gentle walk to the kitchen. The goal is simply signaling to your cardiovascular system that rest time has ended. Step 3 is eating something containing protein within the first hour after waking. A hard-boiled egg, some Greek yogurt with a sprinkle of nuts, a small handful of almonds. Just enough nutrition to stabilize your blood sugar. Step 4 is protecting your first 30 minutes from stress. No news programs, no emails, no difficult conversations. Consider this period your neurological warm-up, as essential as stretching before exercise. Step 5 is continuing to move throughout the entire morning. Don't allow yourself to sit for more than 30 minutes at a stretch without standing or walking briefly. Set a timer on your phone if that helps you remember. Remember, this information is meant to educate and empower you, not to replace the personalized advice of your own physician. Take what you've learned today and use it as the basis for a valuable conversation with your doctor. Let me share one final story. Margaret came to see me at 63, living in constant fear. Her older sister had suffered a debilitating stroke the previous year, leaving her partially paralyzed and unable to live independently. Margaret was absolutely convinced the same fate awaited her. She had the same family history of cardiovascular problems, similar body type, even similar blood pressure readings. Margaret told me during our first meeting with tears in her eyes, "Dr. Harrison, I lie awake at night wondering if tomorrow is going to be the day it finally happens to me. I feel like I'm just waiting helplessly for the worst moment of my life." We went through Margaret's daily routine together in careful detail, and I discovered she was hitting almost every single risk factor I've discussed today. She never drank water in the morning, just black coffee. She took her medications on an empty stomach. She spent hours watching stressful news starting the moment she woke up. She rarely ate anything before noon, and she moved very little during those critical first hours. Here's what we did together. Water became her first act upon waking, before anything else happened. We added just 5 minutes of gentle movement before she allowed herself to sit down. We incorporated a small protein-rich breakfast within the first hour, even on mornings when she felt she had no appetite. We created what Margaret started calling her peace bubble, a protected 30-minute window with no screens, no news, no worrying. 18 months later, Margaret came into my office for a routine checkup. The first words out of her mouth were, "Dr. Harrison, I woke up this morning and I realized something incredible. I'm not afraid anymore." Her blood pressure had normalized into healthy ranges. Her cholesterol numbers had improved significantly. She had more energy than she'd experienced in years. And that haunted, fearful look she'd worn to our first meeting was completely replaced by something that looked remarkably like genuine hope. That transformation is what I want for you. Not just better numbers on lab tests, but genuine peace of mind. The deep knowledge that you're doing everything within your power to protect your brain and preserve your independence. If you found this helpful, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you subscribed. I release new videos every week specifically designed to help people like you take control of their health. I promise to always give you the science without the hype. Tell me in the comments below which of these 5 morning habits you're going to change first. I personally read every single comment. Health after 60 isn't about dramatic overhauls or impossible lifestyle changes. It's about consistent daily awareness. Your brain isn't asking you to be perfect. It's simply asking you to pay attention to the signals it has been sending all along. The morning is not merely how you start your day, it's how you protect your entire future. Every glass of water you drink upon waking, every minute of gentle movement before you settle into stillness, every peaceful moment you create before the world's demands rush in. These aren't small, insignificant things. They're the foundation of a longer, healthier, more independent life. Japanese physicians who have studied centenarians for generations understand this profound truth. The morning sets the tone for everything that follows throughout your entire day, and ultimately your entire life. Honor it, protect it, use it wisely. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time.